the only truth that is happening in this fight is that Errol Spence is getting beat. I'm the biggest welterweight out there, and I will bully him in the ring on May 27th when I will be a beast in that ring. I was a 6-year-old when I first came to the lane with my uncle, and I'm overwhelmed that I can finally fulfill my dream and defend my world title here. There was no way I was giving up that title as I worked so hard to get in the first place, so he's got to come to my backyard and take it from me. The Americans come here with a lot of hype, like Jeff Lacey, and he looks the part at the minute, but he has never taken on an animal like me, and after I beat Spence, my aim is to wipe out the rest of this 147-pound division and unify it. Those are the words of Kell Brook speaking about his fight with Errol Spence at a press conference today at Bramall Lane to announce the fight. Errol Spence was also in attendance. I'm now going to quote Errol Spence. This is one of his retorts to what Kell Brook said. Spence said, "I'm going to do what true champions do and beat the real champion. I don't want to win a world title when it is vacant. Kell is good, but I am better. And this is my lifelong dream to be a world champion. I've waited a long time for this, and I will take his title on May 27th. I'm now going to quote Dominic Ingle, who is the trainer of Kell Brook. He says, "If you watched Triple G at the weekend, you can see he isn't the same fighter after he fought Kell. In fact, Kell knocked the stuffing out of him, and we provided the blueprint for how to beat him. Kell loves fighting southpaws. It's probably easier for him than an orthodox fighter. Errol Spence will learn a lot on the 27th of May, but it won't be his night. He's billed as the best American at 147, but I don't think he is. They need to rethink their game plan if they believe they're going to win." So those are the words of Dominic Ingle, the trainer of Kell Brook. Now, it was all fun and games at the press conference. A lot of back and forth exchanges between Brook and Spence, but more so between the two trainers. It was all pretty funny. But as far as the quotes I've just given you, there are some interesting things there. First of all, Brook is once again comparing Errol Spence to Jeff Lacey. But as I've said previously, Errol Spence is no Jeff Lacey, and Kell Brook is certainly no Joe Calzaghe. So I don't really put much stock in that particular comparison. Calzaghe, in my view, was a far better fighter than Kell Brook and will go down in history as such. And also, in my view, Errol Spence is a far better fighter than Jeff Lacey. So I see this as a much more competitive fight than Calzaghe against Lacey, a much more dangerous fight. So, I really don't put too much stock in those comparisons. As far as the other things that were said, like Dominic Ingle saying that Triple G was not the same after he fought Kell Brook and that Kell Brook beat the stuffing out of him, I couldn't disagree more strongly. Kell Brook was a smaller guy moving up to fight Triple G, whereas Danny Jacobs was a much bigger guy than Triple G. He was probably, close to 10 pounds heavier than Triple G on fight night. Triple G is not a middleweight himself, if we actually want to be accurate about weight divisions. Triple G weighs over 170 pounds for most of his fights when he's actually in the ring, and the middleweight limit is 160. So, he's not a middleweight either, but Jacobs is even less of a middleweight than Golovkin is, 180 pounds in the ring. So that's the reason, or at least one of the reasons, why he was able to give Golovkin so much trouble. I don't believe it had anything to do with what Kell Brook did to him in terms of Kell Brook knocking the stuffing out of him. I just don't buy that at all. To me, Dominic Ingle sounds gassed when he's saying all that kind of stuff. As far as Kell Brook enjoying fighting southpaws and being good with southpaws, I haven't seen him against enough southpaws, particularly not good southpaws, as a professional to be able to judge. But one thing I do know is that growing up in the Ingle gym, the Winkerbank gym over there in Sheffield, he will have certainly sparred a hell of a lot of southpaws. People like Junior Witter, who's a very tricky southpaw, and many other southpaws in that gym. No question about it. He won't have any lack of experience, at least not when it comes to sparring southpaws. But Errol Spence is not like an Ingle southpaw. The Ingle southpaws are kind of tricky, switch hitting, in the same kind of mode as a Prince Nassim or a Junior Witter or a Harold Graham, etc. Whereas Errol Spence is a much more conventional southpaw. He's not really a slick at all, Errol Spence. He's a guy who likes to apply pressure, who likes to throw body shots. And I think his southpaw stance, it will leave him vulnerable to Kell Brook's chocolate brownie, that straight right hand down the pipe. Because Spence is not as side on as a lot of other southpaws are. He's kind of more squared up. So he will be susceptible to that punch at long range. But once he gets up close, and you could see from the head-to-head at the press conference, Errol Spence is just as tall as Brook, if not a shade taller. So I don't think Brook will find it easy tying this guy up, because the southpaw angles are a bit different, the way the guy's body is angled towards you. So I don't think he'll find it easy to tie Errol Spence up. And I think Spence will be able to get off his famed body shots and go to work on the inside. And that's where Brook is going to be most vulnerable. So I think it's all set for an excellent fight. And I have to say, 2017 already has been a great year so far in boxing. And I think it's shaping up to be one of the best years we've had in boxing for a very, very long time. So I think we all need to be happy as boxing fans. Boxing fans, a lot of them anyway that I see online, are so preoccupied with being miserable and hyping up misery, hyping up how terrible everything is. Well, I'm a glass is half full kind of guy. And I wasn't too perturbed by the way 2016 went. There were still plenty of good fights in 2016, even though so many people saw it as a terrible year. I saw some stuff on social media of people asking the question, is 2016 the worst year in boxing history? I mean, that is such a ridiculous question. Give me a break. You know how many terrible years there have been in boxing over the decades? There have been much worse years than 2016. Unbelievable. People go over the top and get melodramatic. But I wasn't particularly concerned with the way 2016 went, because I knew in 2017 there'd be plenty of good fights. And so far we've had some incredible fights. I mean, James DeGale versus Badou Jack, you won't see many better fights than that. Roman Gonzalez fight on the weekend was a great fight. Triple G's fight, I mean, it wasn't a classic or anything, but it was still an interesting fight. It was a good matchup. So, there have been others as well. So I think we need to be happy with how 2017 is going at the moment. And this fight right here, Kell Brook versus his mandatory challenger Errol Spence on May 27th at Bramall Lane in Sheffield, could end up being one of the candidates for Fight of the Year, because you've got two young guys who are in the prime of their life. They're hungry. They believe in themselves. They're very aggressive. You saw the way they were talking to each other at the press conference. This is what you want to see. And this is when you get magic, when you get two peaking fighters like this. I mean, Errol Spence might not even be peaking yet, but he's in his late 20s. He must be close to peaking. And you saw with James DeGale and Badou Jack what happens when you get two young, relatively young anyway, they're in the early 30s, James DeGale and Badou Jack, fighters who are peaking. You saw what they produced. You saw what Keith Thurman and Sean Porter produced, two young peaking fighters. So I'm very much looking forward to this Kell Brook Errol Spence fight. I've been saying all along that I'm picking Errol Spence to win. I don't think it's going to be easy for Spence necessarily. I think Kell Brook is by far the toughest and most dangerous opponent that he will have faced in his professional career. But I do believe that he has the style and the ability and the momentum to get the job done and wrestle the IBF welterweight title from Kell Brook. If he was to lose, I wouldn't be shocked or surprised in the slightest. Kell Brook is an excellent fighter. And Spence is definitely going into the unknown. This is a big step up for Errol Spence. I'm certainly under no illusions about that. But I do feel that it's his time. That's just my view. Let me know how you feel in the comment section below about the press conference. How did it go? What did you take from it? Who are you picking? Is there anything that you've heard or seen in the build up to the fight so far which would sway your opinion one way or the other? There was a lot of speculation and worry among boxing fans that this fight might not actually go ahead, but it's been announced today. They've had the press conference. I guess the contracts have been signed. So unless somebody pulls out with an injury, then it's going to go ahead. Drop your comments in the comment section below. Let me know how you feel. It's Hatman, I'm out.